so many companies get so fixated, in terms of the technology or putting in capabilities such as digital channels or mobile experiences, that oftentimes the outcomes for the customer is missed. So without a doubt, we are in this age of experiences, and the customer experience is that number one influencer of purchase decisions. It's becoming a lot more important, more than just product or pricing or features. It's experience that's driving how customers want to interact with brands. Digital first, of course, in a digital world, data is paramount, but it's also the usage and how companies treat and protect data. That comes in at the number two spot. How do we make things more individualized, more specific, more relevant to customers? And actually, that's what holds customers' attention. It gets them to be more sticky with companies, right from the upfront engagement till the point of retention and loyalty. At least the leaders in this industry, they're moving from a sense of being a digital-first enterprise. We've heard that term quite a lot, but they're starting to change the business model to be more digital, right? That means not just working with customers within the confines of your own organization, but also the networks that you're going to have across with your partners, your suppliers, your communities. That happens with regards to the data exchange and the information exchange that's happening across all of those layers. So someone asked me a question earlier, does CX still matter? We're in a tough environment. Yes, we are. Economically, it's difficult. But what executives are showing is that they're not letting up in terms of transformation. CX still is the number one reason, top business priority. Customer-focused digital experiences is the number one priority for C-suite executives. How do we use new technologies, things like investing in decentralization or Web3, metaverse technologies? But more importantly, it becomes how do you make that purposeful for customers? Less about the marketing, more about the outcomes. The enterprise wants to be customer-centric. They are thinking about the customer, but they're struggling to act like one. Still, it really comes down to making sure that we have the right tools, the processes in place, but most importantly, activating it. So 3 parts to this definition. The first part is the nature of the relationship that customers have with brands, right? It's broken it up in terms of, is it an empathetic relationship? And I want to emphasize here, empathy here that I'm referring to is cognitive empathy. That's the second part of the definition, which is what does the customer want? What are their needs? What are their objectives? Do you know their purpose as to why they've been embarking on a journey with this particular company? And then how are you going to go fulfill on that? And the third part of the definition comes down to how do we scale this? And of course, that's typically where technology does a brilliant job of actually doing so. We talk about customer experience a lot, but one thing that I also want to be cognizant about is businesses are in business because they're trying to make money, right? And so the last bit of this is really focused in terms of the outcomes that businesses can derive by running through CX. And I've broken it up into 4 pieces of it. The first one being businesses gain a lot more predictability in terms of the communication they have with customers. That engagement being a lot more, anticipatory, right? I recognize what I want to talk about to customers. Obviously, I think this is have customers stick with me and therefore grow lifetime value with them. The third piece of that is building sort of this portfolio of unified customer intelligence that can then be used to drive any subsequent experiences or engagement you have with customers. And the last piece of it being mutual trust. Now, I talked a lot about trust earlier. If customers start to trust your brand, then even if you make a mistake as a brand, that's okay, because there's a sense of forgiveness that starts to come in. So you have a little bit more latitude, but in order to get to that point, you've got to first establish trust. And trust outcomes start to drive loyalty, retention, advocacy, and obviously at the end of the day, brand equity, which directly translates to revenue. The digital first experience, right? And there's 4 pillars I'm going to talk about. The first one I want to start with is this notion around customer value parity. I recognize, like I said, businesses aren't here to run a charity, but at the same time, what is the parity? How are you trying to maximize what value you're offering customers as part of that experience outcome versus the value that the business is gaining? The second thing I want to talk about is this notion around immersive experiences. I don't know if any of you heard this term, experiences for customers. In the sense that we're putting in technology in place, but eventually it comes down to saying, can I make the experience intuitive? Can I make the experience memorable? And I'll give you another quick example here. Now, I talk about empathy experiences in terms of obviously understanding customer sentiment, recognizing how are we going to have this right level of conversation by knowing what the customer feels, what they do. Customer intent is something that's coming up a lot based on behavior in terms of how customers are navigating websites or the types of actions or even conversations that they're having with companies. And if I anticipate the right type of outcomes customers are looking for based on insights that I have, then I can lead and deliver to much more empathetic customer experiences. Again, it comes back to the notion that I talked about earlier with regards to cognitive empathy. The last piece of this is going to be engendering greater customer trust as data that me as a customer or you as a customer are willingly sharing with organizations. But again, remember that it's an exchange back for some value. As long as you're offering that value exchange, that's something that changes the perception of what customers have about you and how much they trust you as an organization. I want to talk about some of the challenges that enterprises are still facing that needs to be addressed. A lot of it is going to be dependent in terms of how do we get to addressing these capabilities. Explosion of data. So there's a lot of that information that needs to be managed, liberated in a sense, right? Opened up, shared, but most importantly, trying to find insights from it. What are the top challenges that you face with regards to CX transformation? Technology is probably not even amongst the top 5 organizations or lack of organizational centricity. Whether or not you have executive support. I talked about activating CX, not just within the technology, but also the employee pieces, the operation pieces, and then of course, there's functional silos. Then I'll talk about is this limited digital infrastructure. Some of this is incumbent with some of the legacy organizations. They're still grappling with one, not enough infrastructure or not the right infrastructure to deliver digital transformation, but it's also from a CX standpoint, the other challenge is a multitude of tools that they've gone through various acquisitions. Some of it is to do with silos. Those companies that were far ahead, more mature in terms of the CX capabilities, gauged by the level of business outcomes and metrics that they hit, those companies prioritized externally focused, meaning customer-focused goals versus just purely focusing it on operational efficiency or employing things like employee productivity. What does it mean when we say everyone owns CX? To me, the first thing starts with that executive support, and at the top layer, it is building sort of the shared accountability across the C-suite, right? So it's not just the CMO function, it's not just a digital officer, it's not just the CIO, it's not just your operations person who runs contact centers, it's a shared accountability. The other piece there is in terms of measurements of CX, it's more important to have if you have just one metric, it's more important to have one metric that's consistent across business functions than just building a laundry list of metrics. And the last bit of it is to be able to use these metrics not to promote what's the improvement that the company has had externally as a marketing function, because then it just becomes a vanity metric. Right? On an annual basis, we run predictions in terms of where we see the market headed broadly for CX. Directional guidance, yes, it's very forward-looking, but it's a directional guidance largely. And some of this is based on or anchored on trends or insights we're seeing in the market today. The rise of the CDPs to be not just to consolidate data within the organization, but be able to offer that up as a centralized service, right? I talked about data sharing, data accessibility. One of the things that we're seeing arise is, and I talked about this earlier, the role of partners or suppliers or networks for the customer, communities. And when you see some of those pieces, there's a ton of trusted data sharing that needs to occur between those entities that may not be within the boundaries of the organization, so customer data hubs come into play. The third in there is with regards to AI and analytics and the move from being predictive to being more anticipatory with experiences, right? Can I anticipate something that you've never seen before? It's knowing customer context, but pushing the boundaries in terms of what can make it more memorable for customers. The fourth one over there is with regards to Web3 technologies. This one specifically is focused on the creator economy. And the last one is the aspect around metrics, where I said, we predict that CES, customer effort score, will overtake or probably push further higher than where it is right now.